Okay, you're on.
Am I audible? Do I sound like you can hear me clearly?
Why can't you see me?
I can't see you too well, but I can hear you.
Wave your hand. Yes, I see you move. I see you move. It worked.
Yay!
Nobody moved. Nobody moved from wherever they are. Everybody, all of you are in the right place.
This is take 16 of Stories with Shastri. We've had a bunch of people come on board up until now. For example, we've got designers, people who, musicians, actors, marketing professionals, and I'm trying to see if I missed out on anyone else, but I'm not quite sure. But yeah, so I have Ritvik Nagarkar coming on board today, and Ritvik is someone who's an engineer who's also a brilliant blues musician, and he is someone who's apparently forced into guitar lessons, which is interesting and strange because I never knew that about him. So let's find out a little more.
What's up? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I can't see. Okay, now I can. Now I can.
All right.
So how are you?
As well as I can be, because honestly, at this point, I don't really know what's going on.
Yeah, I don't think anyone does. Someone was telling me, "Oh, the lockdown is ending," and I looked at them and I just went like, "Oh, you delusional fool." So,
I
it's.
mean,
But
at
other
some
than that,
level, I'd like to
what's
believe
been?
that as well. So,
I'm sorry.
I said at some level, I'd like to believe that as well.
Yeah, as would I. But I think it comes. I don't know if it is very pragmatic to do so at this point.
Yeah.
But so for my listeners, could you introduce yourself a little bit?
All right. I am a blues guitar player slash singer. I started playing professionally in 2016 with my band Triple Shuffle that I formed. And yeah, I've been that's been my main project ever since. And I've been an engineer on the side. Honestly, I should say I've been a musician on the side. Yeah, that way. And yeah, I'm in my last year of engineering, last semester of engineering. And yeah, that's about it. Yeah.
So, how did you end up? I mean, you were okay, so that I get, but how did you end up being forced into uh, learning the guitar and then seeing the beauty in it? How did something like that happen?
So when I was in school, I was never into any sports or any sort of activities other than just wasting time, if you could call it that. And we had a guitar teacher nearby where my dad spotted a few kids going to the guitar classes with their guitars on, and he said, "You know what? You wasted day doing nothing anyway. So why don't you
Hmm.
go? Why don't you do something productive with your time?" I'm like, all right, I'll do it if you say so. And that's how I started. But then later on,
Hmm.
I guess getting better at it and really improving and like putting in the work and really seeing that I was improving was sort of like a motivational thing for me. Where I went, you know what, if I put in work, I can actually see the results, which
Right.
should have been obvious, but at that point, at that age, it was instant gratification for me on a certain level. So that's how I
And how old were
went
you
to it.
again at that point? I'm sorry, how old were you?
I must have been around 12. Yeah,
Oh,
11, 12.
wow, that's quite a young age.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, you were saying. Go on.
So yeah, that's what happened. And after that, I sort of started listening to a lot of music. And thanks to the internet and back then, YouTube suggestions was a huge thing. Discovering music, because back then there was no
Yeah.
Spotify and all of these sites. So as soon as you got onto music that you liked, you got all the suggestions, and that was the kind of music that I usually did like.
Hmm.
So I started researching, I started studying about the musicians that I admired, and that's sort of when I decided that I wanted to do this full time.
That's pretty cool. So, what about the blues as a genre resonated with you? I mean, I have an idea about what blues is, but I'm definitely sure that I'm wrong.
All right.
So, So what about it resonates with
So
you?
what do you think? What is your idea as to what you think it is? Because I usually like asking this question because there are different answers and they're very interesting answers, which are partially right, but people also have like a very wrong impression as to what the blues is. So it's pretty interesting to see what people think. So what do you think it is?
For some reason, I've always seen it as a genre that is gritty, but it makes you groove. It
Hmm.
can be gritty, but it can also make you groove at the same time.
Right.
So the whole dance your forget your troubles away type of thing, that's how I've associated the blues. So what is it exactly?
Right. That is fairly accurate, dude. Good job.
Oh, not
That's
bad
that's
points for me.
that's usually what I tell people. But historically speaking, blues is the genre of music that the black slaves in America.
Right.
It was their music because they were not welcome or they were not allowed in the parts
Yeah.
of town that white
That
people
was
have.
their form of
So this
yeah.
was their form of entertainment.
Yeah, I knew that bit, yeah.
Yeah, so that's where it started, and it sort of came into the town of where white privileged people started listening to it, and they started playing and just expressing their own take on it because music across countries and even across states, like if you see
Hmm.
blues like Texas blues or Chicago blues or say New Orleans blues, they're all different.
Yeah.
And that's because music back then it was difficult for music to travel because there was no internet or there was no there was no source as to which the music could travel with. So what happened
Right.
was usually people who visited that area came back,
Hmm.
and when they started playing it, people around them started playing it, and they sort of had their own take because they never really had proper knowledge as to how it was. And the historical bit of it made sense to me because that is sort of how blues spread across the world, and
Yeah.
also how I learned it. Because the
Hmm.
main reason as to why I was drawn to it first was all the influences, like all my guitar influences were blues players. And at that
Right.
point, it was sort of, it seemed easy to me to get into, but it's something difficult, it's difficult to get good at. So,
Yes.
the
Okay.
entry into it was easy, but getting
Hmm.
into it was so much better because since I'd gotten into it and I was listening to the same kind of music, it made it so much better.
Right. Do you think people who listen to the blues can be elitist in nature?
They are, they are, and I wouldn't lie about that. I don't know why that is honestly, because when you like now that you think about the history of the blues that I just told you, there is no
Yeah.
reason for anyone who listens to the blues to be an elitist. Like it goes against what the genre stands for.
It does.
But in a way, what happened when the blues came into mainstream, which it never did really, but guys like Eric Clapton, the white boys from the UK,
Yeah.
when they sort of modernized the sound, a lot of people were introduced to it. So what happened amongst the black communities is that they said, dude, this is our music. Like it's
Hmm.
not cool for you to, or you're not really feeling it because you've not been where we have, and that is sort
Yeah,
of
and
where
where the
the
music comes
elitist
from. Yeah.
mentality came in. But I know what you're asking, and that's a completely different question, which is true as well for some odd reason.
Hmm.
But yeah, that is one of the reasons as to why people are elitist. But the first reason, like what I said to you, is usually how it started out in the 80s. The black people
Yes.
thought the white people were actually popularizing it because it was difficult for, say, a black man to popularize something because they had no screen time, they had no TV time, because they were
Right.
still a majorly oppressed race.
Marginalized. Yeah.
So
So
that's what
what? But coming to, the present scenario as of now, do you see, what do you think, like, do you see it growing as a genre or, the following for blues as a genre? Because I feel like the amount of people I see consuming blues has increased a lot, like on my Instagram feed, at gigs, the amount of people who show up. So what do you have to say about that in comparison to, say, the last 5 years?
I feel like the bands have definitely decreased in number in term because
Really?
yeah, in terms of the older bands and the older cast that actually did it because they will say second generation or third generation. By that year, the older people who've actually lived through that era of where blues was sort of mainstream are dying out. Like they're getting older, they're not interacting as much because social media is now a new thing.
Yeah.
But what that also has done though is now social media is introducing this genre to a bunch of different people. So in a way, it's sort of a give and take, where a lot of people, a lot of blues fans that did exist, are dying out, literally and figuratively. As morbid as that sounds, that's true.
Yeah.
And it's also sort of introducing a new generation of musicians and listeners. But I'd say musicians mostly because if you really think about the people that are consuming blues music, it is mostly musicians. If you have to really break it down.
Right.
And that is because they're drawn to the music, just the way I was. So it's sort of a give and take where there's a bunch of fans that are moving out of this entire bucket of blues listeners, and there are new people coming in. But net, I do feel that people listening to the blues are increasing, but that is just because social media has a huge reach.
Yeah, it
And
is.
Spotify, and I feel like radio is making a comeback now.
Yeah, it is. I'm so happy about it.
So yeah, that definitely helps.
Yeah, I'm sure. I think the one person I can think of when he said blues musicians and consumers are dying literally and figuratively was Rahula, who so for
Yeah,
those of you who don't
last
know, he was
years ago.
yeah, he passed away a few years ago, unfortunately. Rahul Chatterjee, or Chads as he liked to call himself, was one of the most brilliant musicians I've had the privilege to talk to or even come across because he's so welcoming and so warm. So
Interestingly,
moving
though,
on.
he's actually one of the main reasons as to why I play live. I don't think a lot of people know this. I don't think he knew this either.
What? Wait, what?
Yeah, I don't remember how I came across him. Honestly, I think this was back in 2014, where
Mm-hmm.
Facebook was a bigger thing than Instagram.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that phase. So I think everyone was putting out content on Facebook, and so was I. And
Yeah.
one of my videos was forwarded to him, and he wrote me an email
Hmm.
saying that, dude, I just discovered you online, and that's damn cool. Let's keep in touch. And I'd obviously heard of him, and I hadn't watched him live till that point because obviously I was underage to
Hmm.
get into places where he used to play at. But that was damn interesting for me to, have someone get in touch with me and tell me that the work I'm doing is good. But I also knew at that point that I was really bad. I used to
Hmm.
suck back then. So
Yeah.
I also had that knowledge, like that self-awareness that, dude, I'm really bad. But the fact that he's actually reaching out means that I'm onto something.
Yeah,
And I
like you have
remember
some potential to tap.
yeah, and I remember I used to write him emails and I used to attach these little clips of me playing. And he used to reply back in all caps, telling me how great that was and telling me how happy he was to see that the genre was being played by people. So that really changed the entire game for me. Where he was actually one of the first people I played with, like on stage, like blues music. So
Mm-hmm.
he was like, there was a jam happening, it was a private party happening somewhere. I don't remember. This was years ago. And he just invited me, and I just showed up. And it was just warm, and the way he was introducing me to people, and he was just talking to me about people, and just talking to people about me was so nice to hear. That, yeah, he
That's
really changed the game for me.
wow. I actually didn't know that, but that's
Yeah,
very nice to know that you had someone who was such a driving force for you and your art.
definitely,
I think
definitely.
a lot of people need that one person at least.
Yeah.
So, moving on? What's your ideal blues gig?
My ideal blues gig, I feel, honestly, I've
The
realized
perfect
blues
one.
music is so simple to listen to.
Hmm.
Is that if you just listen, you'll get into it. Like, you don't need to know blues, or you don't need to anticipate breaks, changes. That's my job. Like, that's the musician's job.
Right.
But what happens with the audience is they become snootish. Like they become very snooty as to what they think is right, and that sort of rubs the people that actually want to listen to the music the wrong way. They're like, well, I guess it's not for me, it's for him. So I feel like an audience that is actually there for the music, and not in terms of if it's a blues gig, because you specifically asked in terms of a blues gig,
Yeah.
is that they just need to know that they just need to relax and listen to the music and let the musician really take them to places, and that happens through the music. And I feel like if they just sit back, relax, and just try to get a handle of what's going on, I feel like it's an easy genre to listen to, and they'll have a lot of fun. And that's my ideal case scenario for the blues gig.
Right. And what's your ideal audience like for any gig? Or what has been your favorite, like your ideal set of, people coming for your gig?
So there's been a bunch of gigs where I've really enjoyed playing. I think you were there for the
Mm-hmm.
Murphy's gig, the one
Mm-hmm.
that happened downstairs, not the upstairs
Yeah,
one.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. I was there for that.
Pub hop bit.
You would
That
come
was fun.
along to meet me.
Yeah, that was
Yeah, that was a
fun.
very fun one.
Interestingly enough, I don't think a lot of people there were blues listeners.
No, they weren't.
Yeah,
They
and I
weren't.
and I figured that, but it was a lot of fun. But that being
Yeah.
said, I've played gigs where I've played for people who are hardcore blues listeners. That was in Delhi at the Piano Man Jazz Club.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
there was a
iconic.
beautiful, yeah, that was a beautiful feeling. But like, you see, it's not the venue that makes the gig; it's the people that make the gig.
Right.
So it goes from a venue like Murphy's where people were there because there was a pub hop happening, versus there
Yeah.
was Piano Man where people had actually bought tickets to come.
Right.
So it's both. But I feel like I did a gig at Hard Rock Cafe, I think last year, where
Mm-hmm.
there were a bunch of bands, there were a bunch of local acts, and we were the ones that was closing the set. And there were like quite a few people there, and again the same thing happened where they were not blues listeners, but they'd come there to support the music, and it was a lot of fun.
Right. That's pretty cool. I've always felt like, because the reason I asked that is because I see a lot of musicians, talking about their ideal audience, because some of them don't like the ones that, clink with their cutlery a lot.
Yeah,
But like imagine you're at Shisha Cafe and someone's like just, trying to get into that steak with
yeah.
all of the power they have in them. And it can get so distracting for the artist that they just go like, you know
Yeah.
what, why is it so irritating? But but yeah, it's great to know that you've at least your audience in that sense. Or how does it feel to introduce, like you said at Murphy's, there were people who didn't know the genre very well or weren't, adept with it. So how did you feel being the one introducing them to it?
Honestly, it's a privilege. Like I hate the vibe the musicians carry, where they are sort of the ones that give off that elitist vibe, and this especially happens with jazz musicians. I mean, not even
Right.
blues musicians, but jazz musicians, where they're like, well, you're not educated enough to understand the music. But
Hmm.
I've realized that if you undermine your audience can tell. Like even if you don't say it, the audience can
Hmm.
always tell. And there's this John Mayer bit where he talks about how you should always understand that the audience is smarter than you. I've
Hmm.
come to realize that is true, and if you actually treat them as equals and try to educate them, because the people that don't want to listen to you, no matter what you do they're not going to listen to you.
Right.
But you might rub people the wrong way if they do want to listen to you, but you act snooty or you're just trying to be cool. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So it is. I take it as a privilege, and anytime I step on stage, I basically assume that I know something that the people don't know. But it is my job, hence it is my job to let them know that this is something that they're missing out on, and if they happen to get into it, it's something that can change their life. And as run of the mill or as commonplace as that sounds, that's very true because that's happened with me. And maybe
Right.
it might not happen to them at that extent, but I feel like there is potential, and unless you as a musician or you as an artist try, uh, who's gonna do it? Like unless it's you, like you care most about your art. So if you're going
That's
to take a
true.
step back and be like, you know what, I'm not going to educate these people, then no one is.
That's true. That's very well said. So, speaking of educating, for those of you who just joined, I'm talking to Ritvik Nagarkar. I'm quite proud of the plug I just made. This is take 16 of Stories with Shastri. Ritvik is a very talented musician. He's a talented guitarist. He's prolific at it. He's also a child prodigy, which I'm going to come to. Uh, and if you have any questions about Triple Shuffle, about his work, about his hair, like what hair products he uses, because apparently a lot of people do. And
There's nothing that's been used, dude. I'm just dying to get a haircut.
yeah,
Anyway,
this heat is going with like it's not as bad as yours, but it's heat is like poofing up mine, so it's
yeah.
a problem. I can't, I'm sweating already. So if you have any questions for Ritvik, please feel free to ask them. We will take them as we go. Coming to the whole trial prodigy thing, because that's how you have been defined. So, by a lot of people I have seen around, and I would also introduce you as one, just as I did. So, do you feel a certain amount of pressure being defined as something like that when you're performing?
Honestly, I don't. I don't in the sense that, you know what, when I have to go on stage, I feel like I have to live up to the hype that's been created. But I feel like
Right.
that hype has been created out of goodwill and not,
Hmm.
trying to gas me up and then see me fall. Because when you say that about me, that is because you genuinely enjoy the work that I do and you're genuinely proud of the fact that I'm putting out the music that I am. So
Yeah.
it's a privilege, honestly. But what that also brings is that you're not always going to be defined as a child prodigy. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
what happens to that is you're thinking 5 years down the line where you're like, you know what? If I don't improve, I'm going to be someone that they used to call a child prodigy, but
Yeah.
no more. So that's the
Yeah.
pressure
Well,
that I feel like people who are young and get into these fields feel. And A, they can either get carried away and ruin it for themselves, or B, they work extra hard because they know that this hype is not going to last.
well, I'm glad you're aware of that, and I hope you move on to people start defining you as the prodigy and not the ageist and call you a child. But
Yeah.
that is eventually that's a long way off, I think. So,
Hmm.
have you ever felt stage fright?
Uh, Interestingly enough, no.
Really?
Yeah, no. Like maybe
These.
like places like Piano Man where I'm in a different city and
Hmm.
I cannot believe because as soon as I remember this happened when I was in Piano Man Gurgaon and I stepped in and it's beautiful and as soon as I stepped in I'm
Yeah.
like, oh shit, this is the big leagues. Like I look around and it's completely empty but it's beautiful, it's well lit, the stage is set up for you. Maybe then, but after a few songs the audience becomes a little familiar. You know what's working, you know what's not. You see that the band is really pumping out energy, and they're there for you.
Yeah.
So yeah, after a point of time, it just becomes a good. But sometimes it does happen. I mean, if I'm playing somewhere like in Pune where I've played quite a few times, where I know who's gonna show up, and I
Yeah.
know the people and everything, maybe not, but sometimes it does happen.
So how do you deal with it?
Mm, dude, I also know that once I get on stage, it's going to disappear in a few songs. And what I do is I prepare for it. I'm like, the first two songs that we do, I know for a
Hmm.
fact that I can nail them in my sleep. Because no matter how good you are, there's always weak links in your set list. Which, if they work,
Hmm.
they're great songs. Like, slower love songs, for example, where you're like,
Yeah.
something goes wrong and you just drop the song. So,
Hmm.
general rule of thumb for me in the band is do the song that everyone is comfortable with. And so usually if there are four people, there's usually one person who's not very comfortable with the opening song. I put it later
Hmm.
on. So we usually start with our strongest songs, and when that is there, that helps us carry the momentum forward. So it's
Right.
it's bringing it and being prepared, both at the same time.
That's pretty cool. So coming to your band, Triple Shuffle, how did you all come up with the name and the whole concept of like you got up one day and just went like, let's start a band, or how did that happen?
So this is a pretty interesting story. I was so Rahula got me into playing live,
Hmm.
but I had to form my own band because well he was playing with his own band, and I stayed on a different side of town, so I had to figure my logistics out. And
Yeah.
I was a part of a band before that, but I sort of got treated as a kid in that entire group
Hmm.
because people there were like 30, 35 plus, and I'm like, I'm sick of this. Like, I need to start something of my own, and I need to start something of my own that I have control over. So that's what I did, and I got together a group of people. And before that, I actually started scouting bands, and I used to go to live gigs, and I used to
Yeah.
just check out the band. And no disrespect to them, but I just saw them, and I'm like, dude, I can do this. Like, given
Hmm.
enough time, I feel like I can do this. And yeah, I formed a band, and it started out as a blues trio, like a three-piece setup.
Right.
And that's how it started. And we had a gig before we could name the band because we started practicing. We
Hmm.
recorded a few demos and we'd send them out to venues. And back then,
Hmm.
Beer Cafe used to do gigs. This is
Yeah.
2016, late 2016, and that was our first
Hmm.
gig. So we had to send in a name for the flyer. And we just came up with Triple Shuffle. It sounded all right. There were three people. It made sense,
Hmm.
and I think if I remember correctly, the plan was to change the name after
Hmm.
we got done with the first few gigs, but then it just sort of stuck, and here we are.
Wow. So you just went on with it.
Yeah.
That's nice. So, you also apparently, when I asked you for your bio, you told me that you genuinely love engineering. How does
Hmm.
something like that happen? It's a stereotype, so that's good.
Skeptical. No, dude, I feel like if this one thing hadn't happened in my 11th and 12th, I don't think I would have enjoyed engineering quite as much. I had a physics teacher
Hmm.
in my 11th and 12th who was honestly, you know how people say the education system would be fixed if we just have good teachers? And I
Hmm.
feel like most people that say that haven't really experienced what having a good teacher means.
That's true.
And I
Yeah.
have, and I know for a fact that what people think, it is a million times better,
Hmm.
and it can definitely change your life. Because I remember I used to have conversations with him where, so he was like an IIT graduate who used to conduct research there, but then he got bored of the job, so he started teaching. But he was really
Hmm.
passionate about teaching. And you know how, again, people who are from IITs or people who are just smart in general have this elitist mentality where they're like, you know what, I know this and this is all I know and this is all I care about and
Yeah.
this is all you should care about as well. But he was not that
Hmm.
way. And I remember there was this one time where we were studying properties of materials, where
Hmm.
metal scales and all of those things like for measurement that you use with
Hmm.
temperature changes, what happens is that they
Yeah.
expand and contract. So with that, the
Yes.
calibration changes,
Hmm.
and you need the method to find out the right measurements with respect to that new scale is very difficult. So I was in class once, and I once asked him, why don't we just invent materials that don't expand or contract? You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Because if you're a physicist, that should be
Yeah.
something to do. But he said to me something that he said something that still resonates with me. He's like, dude, no matter how good a physicist is, it genuinely boils down to how expensive it would be to create that material. And
Yeah.
financially, if it's not possible, this is what you're gonna have to do. And that's where I realized that there's multiple ways of looking at things, and that is basically what science is. And that's what he taught me, and that's what
Hmm.
maths taught me, that's what physics taught me. That's why I love engineering. Like, I'm not saying I'm really good at it, but
Hmm.
from a distance I can definitely be like, oh dude, that's beautiful. I might not enjoy it, but that's definitely cool.
So, do you think science is subjective? Because a lot of people say science is just fact, so it can't be subjective.
Dude, the thing is, science is full of theories, and there's always going to be people that come and try to disprove theories. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because the
Yeah.
models of thinking that have been applied to come up with something
Hmm.
might not always hold true.
Hmm.
Other thing is the people that can come up with an explanation probably are already dead.
Right.
So now the problem that happens with science, I'll tell you, is that we as a race now feel like we don't have problems worth solving anymore.
Hmm.
We don't feel like there
What?
are problems worth our time. Because if you see, most of the problems that we think about have already been solved. Like electricity has been invented. Like it's been found that you can use electricity. You know how
Yeah.
to drive from one place to other. You know automobiles and stuff. So stuff like that, like the basic fundamental stuff like that, has been discovered, and shit like a cure for cancer is not. So there's a huge gap. So what happens with intellectual minds at this point in our generation is, instead of going there, like instead of looking at, you know what, how do I find a cure for cancer? You usually
Hmm.
try and break down these theories because there's nothing worth your while to do. And it's basically like an artist, where if you say science, a scientist is an artist, where if you don't have anything to do as an artist and you're not completely focusing on your art, your mind goes to weird spaces. Like this is my hypothesis as to what I think is wrong with the science world and where people think it is subjective. That is one part of it, but majorly I feel like people who say that science is subjective or even have theories, I feel like don't understand science well enough, and that includes me.
Right.
Where I'm like,
Yeah, I think
I
me too on
get
some level.
I get the theory of quantum physics, but I cannot wrap my head around it. You know, stuff like that.
Why not?
Sorry,
Why not? Why can't you wrap your head around quantum physics?
because dude, what it basically says, like one of the theories says that. Something that exists in your life is both a particle and a wave. In theory, that's all right, but it is so abstract that the human mind tries to imagine whatever it is that it hears and sees.
Hmm.
So if you hear something like you're seeing me, you're looking at me, and I'm a particle and a wave at the same time, and you can
Yeah, like
determine my.
light is a particle and a wave.
Yeah, no, but we all are.
Yeah.
All objects, including you and me, were a particle and a wave. So if you're looking at me,
Hmm.
I am a particle and a wave. So if you look at me in particle form, you will not be able to determine my wave function. But if
Yeah.
you try to find out my wave function, you won't be able to tell where I am, because a wave is gives you the probability of where the particle can be.
Yeah.
That's sort of abstract, is to wrap your head around, because well, you're saying that this thing is there, but then it's also
Hmm.
not there, but it's only there when I look at it, that sort of thing.
Hmm. Are you talking about Schrodinger's cat or the uncertainty principle?
That is one, like that is a very popularized version of the
Right.
entire quantum physics thing, but
Right.
the place where it starts is the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, which
Yeah.
says that you can determine the
Never know the
velocity of a
position or the
particle.
momentum. Yeah.
It's either or. It can't be
Yeah.
both.
That's the
But
one thing I remember in school. Yeah.
yeah, the Schrodinger's cat thing is like a modern, sort of a simpler form of, telling it to the kids,
Yeah.
because it's easier to understand. But it's basically the same thing.
Hmm. That's pretty cool. Uh, I had another question, but I think I'll come to that later. However, I want to understand one thing. You recently released an album at home, so
Yeah.
you went solo with an album. So was that something that I know you did it because you were in the lockdown and it and all of that, but was it something that you've always wanted to do and has it been on the table for a while, or was it just something you did because of the lockdown?
The lockdown definitely gave me a reason to do it, and a good enough reason to
Mm-hmm.
do it, because the main motivation for me to do it was, well, not the main, but a catalyst in that entire process was the fact that I felt like if I didn't do anything after the lockdown ended,
Hmm.
I would have felt like I did not spend my time productively. So that was one
Right.
of the catalysts. But the main reason is for doing that was I've always been a guitar player, and vocals
Hmm.
and songwriting and vocals has not been my first thing. It's always been guitar playing for me.
Hmm.
So I sort of wanted to challenge that, and I wanted to get out of that entire state of mind. And recently, what had happened was right up until the lockdown was imposed, I was playing a lot with Zayn,
Hmm.
where I was just being the guitar player, but that also helped me to watch him be a singer and a vocalist. But I'm like, dude, that's damn
Yeah.
cool. And I
Yeah, he does
realized
a fabulous job.
I would want to do as well. So it's
Hmm.
something that I tried out.
Right. Okay. That's good. So for those of you who haven't heard it, Ritvik's album's on Spotify. It's called Written, Lived, and Recorded,
Yeah.
which I really love. I personally love that name because I'm biased towards it,
Yeah.
but it would work. So, tell me a little more about who Ritvik Nagarkar is beyond his guitar.
I think
And
people
his
who've been
delivery.
watching and people who've stuck around for long enough know that I'm a nerd, like a science geek,
Hmm.
nerd through and through.
Hmm.
That's been my thing, dude, because I feel like if it wasn't for music, and I keep telling my close friends and my family that, it is that if I wasn't into music, I would definitely be into some sort of research, some sort of
Right.
psychology based, science based research. And I did try for it, honestly, after my 12th. I tried to get into ISER. But the basis for getting
Oh,
into ISER is an exam that you have to memorize for.
hmm.
And that sort of beat the purpose for me. I'm like, dude, this is not happening.
Yeah, I don't like the whole idea of learning by rote. It's just not something I can do.
Yeah. So I figured that
It's
if there was like a better way of approaching research, I'm definitely sure that I would have gotten into it. But
hmm.
since it was something that I had to, mug up shit for, I couldn't do it.
But do you think that's what's wrong with the whole system? Do you think that's why people are not actively pursuing science or enjoying it as much because of that reason?
So there's a bunch of reasons. A is if you ever say to anyone, like if you're ever in that stage where you're in your 12, like now if you decide to get into research, probably your close
Hmm.
friends or your professors, anyone that to seek guidance from, will be like, that's cool. But in a place like 11th and 12th, the idea of getting a solid job is so
Hmm.
shoved down your throat that research is really not a good way of earning money unless you're right at the top. And the
Right.
getting to the right at the top happens, say, in like 15, 20 years if you work hard enough and you're lucky. So there's a lot
Hmm.
of variables involved. So people around you are like, dude, it's not safe. Like it's sort of like getting into music, but a little better.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons. And two, dude, we just haven't been taught in a way that once like that inspires kids to want to get into research, because it's so internalized within them that they have to get a job right after, like they have to study for their 12, right after they graduate they're going to get a good job, a good salary, and that's all. That environment is not really conducive to anyone wanting to pursue research, because why would you? Because
Yeah.
research means uncertainty. Like you might be the brightest mind on the planet, but you might not come up with anything all your life. You need to be okay with that. And I feel like
Yeah.
the way the education system is set up, I don't think you can ever live without a victory, so to
Hmm.
speak. Because if you get into research and someone's funding your research, it is very possible and it's very okay for you to not come up with anything ever, anything new. Say let's say you help out people, you write a bunch of papers with a bunch of your researcher friends. That's cool. But yeah, I don't think people can digest the fact that they might not ever come up with anything, and I don't think they're ever okay with that.
Hmm.
Like it's
And
hard to win in a setup like research. Like there's no winning.
right, there are people who spend years of their lives and they in remote places of the world and come back with nothing. And then
Right, exactly, and you need to be okay with that. And if you're
yeah,
not, research is not for you.
right. It's not. I understand that, but then what I'm still trying to understand is why is it that actually, do you think our generation is someone who is defying that whole ingrained idea of that you have to get a job after you're done studying?
Yeah, but I feel like now it's changing. Like, if you'd asked me this question last year in December, like a few months ago, I probably would have said yes. But now that this entire situation has come up, it's difficult to get a job. And honestly, I feel like parents that understand that the job market is very uncertain and very volatile will push their kids to get into something that is their own. But now the problem is the kids don't know how to do that. Like, for example, I don't know if you've had like a general, very run of the mill sort of a degree, but I have. And so I can speak for myself, where I'm like, like how you and me, we started shit, we wanting to do something, and we have the drive to put out something, whether or not it'll work. Now, I
Yeah.
have kids from my engineering school or my college or my school where they were in a position, like they wanted to get a job, but now they're just pushed out in the world. Now, what do they do? At least you and me, we have the experience.
Right.
So now the fact is that yeah, it was ingrained, but I feel like that's going to change. But I feel like that change is just going to make things worse because people don't know how to be autonomous and work independently and get along with people and work with them. For example, you putting this thing together, even if from the outside it's just a talk show, you and I know how difficult it is to put this thing together.
Yeah.
But people who've never
I'm
done
sorry for
that,
the trouble, though. Yeah.
sorry.
I'm sorry for putting you through the difficulty.
No. I love it. That's the thing. I love it. But the people who've
Yeah.
never experienced this and the people that have been pushed into this, how do they cope?
Yeah.
Because it involves you having to write emails, you having to make sure everything is on in order, you making sure everything starts on time, ends on time. They're not used to it. For them, this is unnecessary because they were supposed to get a job. Now, guess what? You're not getting a job. What are you supposed to do? So
Yeah.
I really don't understand now. Now that the government is basically, dude, giving out loans. Like they're literally handing out loans for anyone who has an idea. And
Really?
yeah. What our Prime Minister, what's the word? Declared. I think it's the 20 lakh crore or whatever the number is. I don't quite remember. Right before the fourth lockdown was imposed to get the
Oh, I
economy
stopped.
on its
Okay, I stopped listening after the second.
yeah.
So, yeah.
That was smart. But what now happened is people are sort of de-investing from China for obvious reasons.
Right.
So now what is happening is economies are trying to become self-sufficient, and what that means is there needs to be job creation from people like you and me who are actually in that
Yeah.
age bracket. So loans
Yeah.
are being handed out basically for free. Not quite. I mean, you do have to work for it. But what's happening is now people are being pushed to start something of their own, but they have no experience, they have no background in it. What do they do? So,
But then I also feel like, having that option of that loan also comes from a place of privilege to a certain extent. Right.
in
It's
what?
not in the sense that, the loan, as long as I don't know much about the details of the loan because I haven't read enough about it, so I would rather not speak about it much. But my only question is, because you read about it, is it going to be divided equally amongst everybody who is unemployed?
All right, that is difficult. No, they're not. They're not handing out money.
Hmm.
That's not what's happening. Like if you have a business idea and if you can put up a balance sheet and you can show you 3 years worth of projections where you show the bankers and you show the government subsidizers that you have a good enough idea that might work, you can get a loan. But now, as to how well that will be executed, I'm really hoping that that gets executed well, but I have no idea. Like that, we're just gonna
Right.
have to wait and watch. Yeah.
Right. One can hope. We don't know
Yeah.
if it's going to
So the
happen.
idea, in its essence, is beautiful, and it's quite a ballsy move. But dude, you know how things are when it comes to these. The first people that are going to get into this is politicians wanting that loan money for God knows what reason. So
Right.
execution wise, we're really gonna have to hope for the best and see how it goes. But as an idea wise, I'm telling you that there is an atmosphere where if you feel like you're confident enough to come up with something that generates employment and generates GDP for the government, there is a little extra support that wasn't there a few months ago. Now, whether it can be accessed easily or whether maybe if you belong to a category that does not have that privilege, I don't know. I don't know what are the privileged categories there. I don't know how it's going to be distributed. I don't even know if there's going to be any form of transparency in that entire scenario.
Right.
But the thing is, there is this thing which encourages people to start something of their own. Now, whether we as individuals can make the most of it and whether the government can keep their promises and execute on it, we'll have to just wait and watch.
Yeah, hopefully. How do you think this lockdown is going to affect musicians? I mean, I see a lot of them finally, putting their music out a lot more than they used to, which I'm very grateful
Yeah.
for. But other than that, in the prospects of musicians who are live performers and not people who just put out music in general, how do you think it's going to affect them?
Now, dude, that's weird, and the answer to that question is damn sad because, and I know this because I've gotten in touch with musicians through people I know that know a lot more musicians than I do. So
Right.
what's now happened is that it's sort of common knowledge. It's this is still speculation. It's sort of common knowledge that live gigs won't start until next year.
Hmm.
Yeah. So now what's happened is the bigger acts basically are like, dude, you know what? I'm gonna take a break for this year. I can afford to.
Yeah.
Yeah. But those are the privileged ones. But I'm not saying privileged in terms of, you know what, they haven't worked for it. Definitely they've worked for it. But, people like Bollywood, like the Bollywood musicians or independent musicians like Ankur Tiwari or, say, Pratik Kuhad, who've been in the scene for long enough, they can afford to say, you
Yeah.
know what, it's all right. I won't do anything for a year. I'm cool. But what has now happened is that everyone below that hierarchy, in that hierarchy, everyone below that is now wiped out. And everyone's been reduced
Yeah.
to zero for at least this 1 year. Now,
Right.
there are a bunch of people, like there's a 1% that can afford to say, you know what, I'm cool. I'm not going to do anything for a year. See you next year. I might release music, I might not. But the rest of the people, like the bottom of the pyramid, is now literally jobless. And that's the reality of it. But trying to look at it in a more positive perspective is now that everyone's sort of equal, now people that take action and move and try to change with the time are going to be the first movers. And they're going to have the advantage over them. So it's sort of leveled out the people that were not the 1%. That has affected people greatly. Let's just see how this works out. Because now, even if live gigs start happening on Instagram Live, or say an app is invented or created, only the top performers are going to perform there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because if
And
you
how
want
many
to
are going to be
monetize
able to
that,
afford to watch it?
exactly, yeah, that's a different story. Now your spenders are now completely different. Now people who
Yeah.
actually have the money to spend are gone down. The people who will play gigs are gone down. Now there's no
Yeah.
concept of, you know what, there's a local band happening at this place where I drink every night. So I'm just gonna
Yeah.
check out the band. Now you're not gonna be like, you know what, this app, I'm gonna download this app and there's this random band that I'm gonna pay for and watch. That dies out because even if you have the money, why would you do that unless you really connect?
Yeah.
So yeah. So now it's basically wiped out everyone that was not in the 1%. And now it just depends on who moves first and who figures out what to do with their art. Or there'll be a lot of people that will, stop doing this, maybe find a job, maybe find something to do, which actually pays the bills, and that's damn cool as well.
Yeah. I mean, whatever you can do to survive, I guess.
Yeah.
But do you think this lockdown has actually helped or maybe in some way catalyzed okay, for example, there's a cover musician
Hmm.
who's always wanted to put out their originals but never really sat down to write. Do you think this lockdown has forced them to do that? And have you seen any musician who's finally ended up doing something like that?
Uh, no, I mean I don't get why that would happen honestly. Is because if you were a cover musician, there was never an excuse for you to never put out original music before this. Like not like lockdowns made recording process any easier for you to do it more. It's actually made them
Yeah,
harder. The only person
yeah,
that I know who's put out stuff is Zayn.
yeah,
But as far as I know, he was going to do that regardless of whether the lockdown was going to be imposed or not. So
yeah,
I don't personally know a lot of people, but logically following that train of thought, I don't know why it might encourage a lot. Maybe what's happening is people see other people being more active online. Maybe that's inspiring a surge of people wanting to put out music. And
right.
mostly people have a lot of time now. There's a lot more time than they had
Yeah, quite
because
quite a bit.
yeah, because when now you realize that when the lockdown was not a thing and you were out and about, you realize how much time you wasted on activities that really did not add anything to your life. And
Yeah,
now,
that's true. It's been quite a wake-up call. Yeah, sorry.
yeah. So now the people know, they're like, dude, now I'm not wasting time because the government's asking me to sit at home. So now I cannot defy that and step outside. So I might as well add something. And what happened with me, for example, where I was like, dude, you know
Yeah.
what? I don't feel like I don't want to feel like I wasted my time. So I'm going to do something.
Hmm.
It's a combination
That's
of
also
all. But yeah, it's definitely made it harder for bands with a drummer, a bass player, a keyboardist, and that entire thing to come together and produce music. But yeah, singer-songwriters are having the time of their life. Like more engagement online because everyone's sitting at home. People are actually online because they're consuming art. Because how long can you watch something like Netflix?
yeah.
So I guess there's pros and cons to everything.
Yeah, that's there. Before we sign off, I want to know, do you have anything that you would say to someone who wants to pick up a guitar, but, or, just doesn't know whether they should or shouldn't, irrespective of their skill set or not?
Oh, definitely they should. They should because if you're talking in terms of a guitar, it's one of the easiest instruments you can play. So you should definitely do that. But going above that, I feel like something that people get into is that they start playing and they're drawn to certain kind of music that's not the mainstream. And they feel and they get disheartened because that's not the mainstream. But what I want to tell people that are starting out is that no matter what you play, like you can play the weirdest stuff, like you can play a bottle online and you put it up online, like you produce something, it is as random as you can imagine, you put it up online, there will be at least one person who connects to your art, and that's because internet has a wide reach. So now it's become a volume game where
Yeah.
you do the stuff that you love and you just put it out and you see if it works. If it works, then great. If it doesn't, now you know what not to do.
Yeah.
So I feel like I
That's
really
great.
want people to not get into the trip of, this is, no one's going to listen to this, because if I was to go there, I'd be like, dude, no one wants to listen to the blues. What's the point of starting a blues band?
Yeah.
But it's not true. People will relate to it no matter how weird your genre is or how weird you think it is, because there's people that are as weird as you are. And that's the best bit about it.
Yeah, I think that's something that is comforting, maybe, for some people.
It definitely is, and honestly, like it inspires more people to put their art out, because I feel like a lot of musicians want to do the mainstream bits, like want to get into stuff that they're not into, and that's all right, but that's not sustainable, and you can't keep up with something that's not sustainable.
That's true. That's quite true. Okay, so we are at the end of this. I hope you had a good time.
Yeah, I did,
Thank
dude. It was fun.
thank you so much for agreeing to do this, and
Thank you so much. Anytime.
it was great. Thank you so much. See
Thank
you.
you so much. Take care.
You too. Bye. Okay, that was Ritvik Nagarkar, and I hope you enjoyed this conversation because we spoke about stuff that was beyond music also, which was great. And Ritvik is someone who you can talk to about stuff like that. Check out his new album on Spotify. It's called Written, Lived, and Recorded by Ritvik Nagarkar. And check out Triple Shuffle, follow them, check out his work. And I hope you enjoyed this session. If you have any feedback, please send it to me. Tell me what I'm doing right, what I'm doing wrong. Tell me how this could be a better experience for you. I'm still working on it. Right now with the lockdown, I have very few options available. And but yeah, let's see. And I kept moving and I noticed that you could see the mess behind, and I would apologize for it, but I'm in my house and you're in yours, so it's okay. I'm organizing, it's fine. But I do this every Friday and Monday. This is Stories with Shastri. And on Monday, we have Anu Sirothia coming up. And we will be talking about sustainable living and how you can live sustainably from within your home and go zero waste. So I hope you join that one. And I am just going to turn this off. And thank you for tuning in.